That would be great.
I can talk really loud.
I mean, we know that.
Oh my God.
That was on the record.
Thank you.
Very cute app, by the way.
Oh.
Come on in.
But it's so retro, right?
Right here is.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's already said. So again, also, you don't have to respond to all of the questions. If there are questions that you don't feel comfortable responding, please don't do so. I mean, feel free not to participate, right? But the idea is that you talk and we listen. That's the idea, and that we engage in engage in this discussion. These are the ground rules for a group, right? So we want you to do the talking. This is about you talking, about reflecting about your experience, about what's happened, and about the questions that we're going to ask. So for the recording purposes, we ask that you speak one person at a time, and I think that Astrid will be keeping score of turn, keeping the record of turn. Who raise their hands one by one. Is that okay?
Okay.
I'll help you with that. So and we may call you if we haven't heard from you in a while. But feel free to say, you know what? No, I don't want to respond to this question. That will be enough for us, okay? And if, at any point, because this is the part of the research project that is also completely voluntary, and that's why I'm so appreciative too. But at some point you want to leave, it's up to you, okay? We will hold it against you. I promise. I don't hold any grudges in my life, honestly, even against myself, So I'm better like that. So. And again, there are no right or wrong answers, and that we mean it because we want to learn. I mean, what we're asking here is what we want to learn from you. So I don't have any, or Astrid or Molly, we don't have any sort of anticipated responses or things that we would like you to say at all. And this is not going to count in any way, for good or for bad, for your master's degree. So just be as open as you want, as frank as you want, and that would be great. And again, it's important to hear all sides. So if you hear something and you disagree, it's important that you just bring it up, not in a contentious way, but just whatever you think. Yeah, I see what you're saying, but this is my perception. So we will not agree, but we will show respect. But this is a very respectful group, and I really mean it, and I love working with you guys. So I know that we don't need for that. So also, what we say here will stay here. Again, like we said, we will be recording the session, so we won't miss anything. But all that we discuss over here, keep it confidential. Don't share it outside, right? And most of all, don't share it with names, right? And that's what we will do as well. So we will respect your privacy. Whatever you say here will be just part of this group. And we will summarize the themes. That's what we will ultimately identify without identifying individuals by name, or even schools, or even the district. So it's something that we are committed to doing. So this is the first part. So we would like each of you to introduce yourself, to tell your name, the subject you teach, your reason for becoming a teacher, and provide a description of the students that you teach, just briefly. It's the same as in the first focus group, if you remember. It's like we want to give some continuation to some things. So you want to start, Ian?
No. Sure.
We'll start on your side.
I'm Ian Savlish. I teach a blended language arts, language development course. The reason for becoming a teacher, I really do believe education is kind of the fundamental pillar of democracy, and that's kind of where it starts. Education has this ability to transcend socioeconomic status, racial inequities, kind of everything, all the trends we see in a society or even across societies have the opportunity to be kind of addressed in education. So that's kind of where I started. I think my skill set just kind of led me there. Mm-hmm. Students I teach at a title school, about 88 to 89% low income or free and reduced. Specifically, my students, primarily Spanish speakers, designated language learners from NEP 2s to LEP 4s.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
My name is Daniela Del Cid, and I teach 8th grade math. And my reason for becoming a teacher was, I love learning. There's you're never gonna know everything, and I just love like constantly learning. And then my 11th grade teacher once said, when we were talking about our ACT scores, that, and she had gotten a 34. We're like, well, why did you become a teacher? Because the common thread is always, you can't teach. And so she shared like, what should stupid people teach? And so like it really impacted me, and kind of like why not? And so I think there's professions that are regarded higher than teaching, and it just stuck with me, and like, no, why not teach? Like, we need intelligent people teaching. Oh, and I teach at Thornton Middle School, and our population of ESL students is, I think, at 86% of free and reduced lunch. And it's pretty high.
Alrighty, my name is Kirby Brish. I teach 6th grade social studies. I became a teacher because, like Daniela said, I love learning. I always loved school. I always was excited about school. And teaching, you learn things every single day, and every single day is different, so it's fun. So I teach at the same school, Title I, and yeah.
My name's Tara Hardman. I teach 6th grade science and engineering. I wanted to become a teacher. I think the first thing was kind of dying in a lab environment. So I didn't want to be confined to just learning one subject for the next 10 years of my life. I like that aspect of teaching, that I get to learn and develop and interact with people. I teach at STEM Launch, which is a K-8 STEM-focused school. I believe right now we're about 60 to 70% free and reduced lunch, primarily Spanish speakers, and also just something to note, I feel like our ratio boys to girls, there's a little bit higher amount of boys at our school to girls.
Okay, so I'm Mary Barone. I teach 8th grade language arts at Northglen Middle School. We're about 85 to 90% free and reduced lunch. It's a Title I school. I've been there for 17 years, so I've seen a lot of changes. Wow. Why I became a teacher, I really like to analyze literature, and I thought I could teach kids how to do that, and so I did that. Anyway, and it's good to have the summers off, although I feel like I haven't had a summer off in a while. Whatever. My description is we do have a lot of ESL, but I'm getting Ian's kids, so I'm getting the monitored students. So they're higher level. I find them to be even better than my other students coming from Ian's class. So.
I'm Deb Jaggard. I teach reading, writing, and study skills to 11th and 12th graders at the district's alternative high school. So we get kids that have been pooled kind of from all of the district schools. And as far as my reason for becoming a teacher, I would say I came from a family of teachers, so education was highly valued for sure in the home I grew up in. But I also think I'm individually wired for a strong sense of justice, and I think that educational opportunities can provide more options for people. And so that's probably a big pull on my heart and head. And then as far as the description of students I teach, it's primarily students that are identified for special education services. However, we also get some students that come to us for just remediation in one small area that might be involved in MTSS or RTI. So that occurs. Out of that group of students, I'd say about a quarter of the students I serve are duly identified special education and ESL.
I'm Robert Pearson. I teach high school math and high school science. I don't have a great reason for becoming a teacher. It's a third career, but I like it, so I'm going to stick with it. And the students I teach, aside from the demographic of the schools, each year I tend to have a handful of emerging bilinguals, anywhere from 2 to 3 in each of the categories of the NEP, LEP, and FEP. So I definitely have some. It's not the majority of the students.
Justin Lee. I teach mathematics, high school mathematics. My reason for becoming a teacher, at surface level, it's just I like seeing the light bulb go on with kids. But on a little deeper level, I feel like mathematics is a kind of an unnecessary gatekeeper for a lot of students, and you hear a lot of people say, "Well, I was bad at mathematics," So the students I teach, high poverty, high transient rate. Also, I would say 70% Spanish speakers.
My name is Lorraine Arbizo, and I teach English at our high school. The reason why I became an English teacher was because a lot of kids are like, I already know English and I don't really need to know anymore. And a lot of them are like, well, I don't really need to become better at it or continue to practice it to become better. And I was also a second English learner, so if I could do it, they could do it, so hopefully I could provide that inspiration for them. And I was also very lucky to have really good teachers that helped me understand that I could go to college, and I wanted to be that inspiration for my students as well. And it was also a way to give back. So I was able to get that from my teachers, so I wanted to do the same for my students. The type of students that I work with are, for the most part, our school population is 60% and above Hispanic and Latino. So it has made our minority become the majority, but our school isn't run that way, because we still need those student leaders to step up a little bit more. And about 51 to 55% free and reduced lunch. So our school has changed into an application process to get in. Like, all of our neighborhood kids are still able to come into our school, but we have had a lot of students apply out of boundary to attend our STEM school. So.
Sarah O'Neill. I teach special education, mostly math, at high school. I got into teaching because I kind of fell into it. I was kind of on a different path, and then realized my skills were in other areas. Fell into special education kind of a similar way. I realized that special education is kind of just all the things that kind of add up to be good teaching, kind of similar to like this program. It's like all of these things that work for all kids, and that you can be intentional about focusing on certain kids. At our school, I think it's, would you say 20%? Hispanic and free and reduced, I would assume. It's definitely changed. When I first got there, I think it was more like 8%. So in the last 10 years, it's changed.
I'm Jason Cianfrance. I teach high school math and STEM. I became a teacher because I couldn't do anything else. Similar to what a lot of people have said, I had a passion for learning. I liked school. I liked doing the school thing. And I just also found in college, when I was helping other people learn, it made me feel a strong connection when I could have somebody have an aha moment. So I like working with young people and having every day be different, so that's why I became a teacher. The description of the students I teach lower level and upper level math and special ed math as well as our high school STEM program. So.
Great. So, well, it's great to have learn more about you. So let's go directly to the question.
Sorry, you can actually leave it there because it's really good at picking up sound, and you're all close enough to it where you don't need to pass it along, just in case.
It was a good place, like.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It was like The Rock.
And don't feel that everybody has to respond to every single question like we've done. Now let's open it a little bit, and just one at a time, but a few responses. And when we think that we've exhausted the question, we'll move to the second one. So the first question then is, based on what you've learned in the program, in what ways do you think your district supports your work with bilingual students?
I think to the extent they need to check it off the DOJ list and not much more.
I would say they're trying to make some improvements, kind of going along that same line. Like we did that training years ago with after they first got their hand slapped, where we had to do 20 hours or something, and it was more like, okay, just write those language objectives on your board and we're good to go. And it didn't seem much deeper than that. And then recently, I know there's been a new focus. I think having this program at our district is one step towards that. I think there's, again, the call for more education of teachers with professional development that'll be rolling out this year. So I think they're realizing that they're not in a great place, but they're kind of making some strides. I don't think it's going to be a perfect fit or a perfect fix for anything, but it's a step.
And I agree totally with what you guys are saying, but I think there's some pockets of schools that have administrators that are doing, like our administrator, he really, I think he should be like a model for what he has been doing in our school. And so I think some schools are doing a really good job, and then I hear just that it's not the same, whereas it should be. It should be more consistent.
Do you feel like you're getting supports from the district for your school?
Not always, because sometimes he has these great ideas or things he wants to do, and the district pushes back and says, no, we can't do that, right, Ian? Stuff like that.
Yeah, I would second that. I think as far as instruction goes, there are these cycles of, we need to get everyone trained on XYZ, but it seems to be more focused on efficiency and more focused on kind of checking off that contract from the DOJ. Whereas I still see some great variance in the district when it comes to policies and programs. We don't have really a directive from the district about our programming and policies stuff, particularly when it comes to bilingual education. We're getting there with a proposed newcomer program and more opportunity for courses in Spanish for native speakers and such that are part of that elective block for many students, depending on the school they're in. But I see the instructional push as very positive. This program, and then hopefully the training they come up with in the next year to meet the criteria on that contract. But I would like to see more movement or more progress, in my opinion, on the program level.
Historically, I'm just going to speak up that at Pathways there was a time frame where we had a bilingual administrator as the top principal. And as far as our climate and culture, it was phenomenal to be able to have him converse with students in their native language and translanguage, I guess, back and forth with English. We have a phenomenal administrator right now. He is not bilingual. But I think having the opportunity, providing opportunities for folks that are bilingual, particularly with English and Spanish, in leadership positions would continue to help our bilingual students.
I feel like it's very admin dependent.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
If you have an administrator or principal who's very in tune to it, your school might focus on it. I feel like our district has a pretty strong history of having things that they try to implement that then get dropped because of accountability and oversight. And like knowing like what are our 2 or 3 big things we're going to focus on, having this be one of them, and having it actually come back on a regular basis is something that I'm not seeing yet.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, I would say a lot of it comes through like larger systemic issues with the district, where our ELLs are seen as a subpopulation within the district, and then we have these kind of equity issues between northern end, more branded as this more affluent suburban district, and our southern end, which is our yellow population, right? And we don't see much
District presence.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
Disparity.
yeah, there's definitely a disparity in that, and I think that's why the ELD programming hasn't progressed the way it should, is because it's not resourced and it's not funded in ways that show that subpopulation as a priority.
I'll just speak to that. Like we looked at our data from last year, and across the district, because of other schools, our testing as a district looks on par or even better than the Colorado state average. And because of that, we're not seen as an issue. Yet at our school, and I didn't do science last year, I did math the year before that. So I just saw this, and this was the previous year. But 4% of our students were proficient. So out of 300 students, 4% of them were proficient in their science standards. Sorry, proficient, yeah. So 96% of our students were not proficient. But, which is a big problem, right? But
Yeah.
because the rest of the district is doing just fine, it's like we look like we're doing fine. Because in some areas, in some standards, the district is above the state. So it's not an issue. But then our school is, like, there are things that need to be changed, and they're not.
I'm going to add to what Danielle is saying. I think this is kind of a subject of this topic, but I feel like something I've learned from this cohort, since we're all from different schools, or a general feeling that I have, is that schools are pitted against each other. Specifically, like dynamics between different schools, depending on you're given a certain amount of budget dependent on percentage of free and reduced lunch. So I think that has an effect on our work with bilingual students and the ability to work across schools.
Any other detail you want to move? Because question 2 is in this direction, right? And you started in this way. So how could the district improve supports for their emergent bilingual student population? What sort of ideas would you have?
Well, Ian did mention earlier that there's a newcomer program arriving soon, which we at Thornton are terrified of, because that's what we'll be, and we'll lose a good chunk of classrooms. So that'll be challenging, but it is exciting to see it come in. I can't wait to learn more about it and how it's going to be, and it seems like a really good thing to see coming around.
Are you saying that newcomers will be sent to your school?
It's the way I understand it.
Oh, okay.
I'm not 100% sure, but the way I understand it is all, for day oneers are going to be reporting to Thornton for a while.
Are they going to ours too?
Yeah, the proposal says there are going to be 3 different kind of magnet programs at schools with the current capacity to handle those the increase in students. So one at the elementary level, one at the middle level, and one at the high school level.
You guys are the middle level?
Proposed, yeah.
Not us? Really?
When does it start? In the fall? Or?
Yeah, when does it start?
2020,
I'm not
I think.
sure.
Yeah,
originally.
I think it's 2021. They wanted to squeeze it in this year. It just didn't quite happen.
Do you know what elementary?
I don't.
And do you know what the program will sort of require? I mean, what would be the established program for newcomers? Is that set or not yet?
Not yet. I think one of the initial ideas was to have one center. One of the issues I see is that it's not really working with any existing community centers, or it's not proposed as a community center or resource center for families. And then the next step in that was it doesn't really make sense to transition into a newcomer program and then transition into a new school. But let's have these students transition once, right, into that new school and just be kind of sheltered in that newcomer program, and then have possible cohorts that go through your content classes after a certain period. But I haven't heard the criteria. So yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction. It is a step towards kind of bilingual supports or first language supports at a program level rather than individual instructor level.
What other supports, right? How could the district improve the supports?
I think recognizing that district-wide, I mean, in a year we're going to have 30-some experts spread up through the district, and take advantage of that and listen, and you know, try in a school, try one thing at a time. You know, like do really well at something. You know, like getting to know your students. I mean, I'd be willing to guess that you walk into you ask many teachers, you know, like, tell me about your emergent bilingual students, what levels are they, you know, what do you think they need for supports? You might get a blank stare. So I think tapping into the people that are going to be in their schools and know what they're doing.
You said that these are experts and as coaches, or
we are getting master's degrees.
We're
He's using the
like,
term expert.
Is the district like planning something
Exactly.
to do with us
Or
now that
do
we're
you
going to
think
be?
that it
Yeah, because I
should?
wonder.
Could it?
That's what I'm
I
saying.
could see us just kind of going along, you know, whereas I mean, in our building, I know our administrator is trying to be able to use us, you know.
Create leadership roles.
Exactly. So I hope he, you know, keeps with that, but, you know.
Yeah, so like converse, that's what I was kind of coming to is our principal knows that we've been in this program for a year and a half and has never once asked us anything about it. Nothing. What are you learning? Is there anything you can bring to the staff? Is there, you know, we would have to go to her and say, hey, could we run something? So,
And you're a department head.
I was.
I am. He's not.
But I would also say like this seal by literacy. I think if the district were to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and just get on board with this, that might send a nice message that they're ready to get going and we're all ready to kind of help support that. So I think that would be a simple thing the district could do to really improve supports.
Yeah. Going back to the kind of system level approach, two ends of the spectrum here. I think we could do a better job in our the southern end of the district to make schools more community centered. Right now, our students more than half are bused from Federal Heights, at least 2-3 miles away. So I think that's one part is becoming more community based with our school buildings and our school programming, particularly for our kind of underrepresented populations. And then on the opposite end, I also think we need to increase opportunities for, I mean, it comes down to busing, it comes down to transportation, but we're a choice district. Our students in any community within our district can choice into other schools, and if we promote that and show that as a good opportunity and provide transportation and provide funding or provide those extra supports in order to get students into the schools of their choice and start kind of changing that dynamic and changing the conversation around what is a school population, what does that resemble? Is it, you know, necessarily only in a community, or do we want to see a clear picture across the district of what our students look like and make that possible in individual schools?
Move on to question number 3. This is our third question for you. Have you noticed changes in the district's leadership, including policies and practices? Right now, we're not only focused on the person, but I mean more in the practices and the policies regarding EL education since you started the program, and if so, in what ways? What changes have you noticed, if any at all?
Well, didn't you kind of mentioned it. I mean, there's been a change because we got another slap on the wrist, basically, and now every single person has to take these ESL classes, right?
Or at
Before
least in
school
certain
starts, which kind of bothers me because I feel like, why do I have to take it? But anyway, but yeah, and it's fairly extensive what we will be doing. I don't quite get the entirety of it, but every single person will have to take something in August, and then a couple more times in the year.
Coaching cycles.
Yeah, and I don't, and I think it's on professional days that we have to do it, but
We already started that process.
yeah, I
so,
know one school did.
So like we have started ELL training again. And like when you first started when I started into the district, I had to take the same ELL training that everyone else had to take, like on the computer.
Yeah.
And then like once you had to come into the district or whatever. But like the first thing that we focused on that ELL training was our language objectives and some strategies that we could use in there. And then we had people that were certified already in like a cultural linguistic diverse masters already. They were already the head of, we're going to come check your language objective and the different pieces that you're doing in order to scaffold those students into the learning that they're doing. So we had to submit a lesson plan with our objective, and then we had to submit another lesson, and then they had to come observe us, and then we had to do a sign off for the district that we had done that. Sorry, I can't speak. But
language forms are
they're rough.
Yeah,
So you do that with every single
So
person?
that's basically, I mean, that's what we had to do in the last round. So our next round is in August.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they'll have us focus on, but at the district they did have, I don't know who was running the PD, but hopefully they were certified. Hopefully they weren't just reading the slides that needed to be read to us, because that was like the one question I had. I hope that they're highly certified to be teaching us what we're supposed to be doing instead of just reading from a slide and then having us do that.
And did you participate in the training? And
Yeah.
And your opinion was that they were really reading the slide only, or?
It seemed like they knew what they were doing. I don't know if it was because they had already done a lesson the day before. Like the middle schools had to go the day before us, and then the high schools went the next day. And I mean, I feel like everyone bought into it because I guess the middle schools hadn't behaved how they were supposed to the day before, and our principal like sent out an email and they were like, make sure that you're engaged because they're checking for that.
They want you to be engaged.
They wanted us to be engaged in the lessons.
I know of people who went to that middle school day, and
Yeah.
it was highly chaotic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't
Not
as
well.
organized
There's some
as.
pretty negative feelings.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was because we're in this program that it was just like things that were super obvious, and it felt like just checking boxes to get things done, like that video cycle and all that stuff. But I'm hopeful that for people who aren't in this program that maybe it was enlightening a bit, but.
Sweepers was in that though.
Yeah, it was. Like there was some good stuff,
was.
but it just was disorganized and just felt like another thing that we had to get off our list, not like anything meaningful.
Do you know who prepared and provided the training? Is it in district?
Yeah,
guys
it
or
was the Adams
others?
12. I know a few, like the ELO coordinators were running the show.
Yeah, but I don't know their name.
And then I think there was like a DOJ person there.
Yeah, I think they coordinated together to create the PD.
Slideshow.
But yeah, it was run by the Adams 12 people.
So we were guinea pigs.
Yeah.
So you were.
And you misbehaved.
Thanks for middle
Justin,
schoolers.
what did you hear about?
Just
Why
the same
was it
stuff.
chaotic?
Just that it was. I heard from a couple of middle school teachers that it was just seemed like they didn't know what they were doing, and it seemed like they were just clicking to the next slide and then being like, oh, what?
Well, and it was middle school and elementary.
At the
So
same
they
time.
were trying to cater to both.
That's not
So
Yeah, I would say, and particularly with the changes in leadership, new positions in and out, new contracts, it doesn't seem like we've taken a step back to do an honest and objective needs assessment, whether that's internal or third party needs assessment across the district. I often go to the coordinator meetings once a month, just to be kind of more involved and see the big picture. And more often than not, it's really unorganized or disorganized, and we don't really have a focus. So building by building, we're not getting a clear message from the district loss department about what the big picture looks like. Where's our goal? Where are we headed to? And how do these programs and these instructional methods and these trainings fit into that? So that's definitely concerning. And then I understand we have to bend and break and flex in order to meet a one-size-fits-all contract, basically, for the district, or one-size-fits-all, policy and programming. So in our school, we're going through some changes right now. For next program year, we're going to have to make sure all of our NEP 1s, NEP 2s, LEP 3s, and LEP 4s have a supplemental ELD block, where at the middle school level, we've seen great success with building that social language and giving choice in elective blocks, and making sure our PSYOP protocols and our instruction is sound in the content level, or in the content areas per grade level.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Just one thing to add, I know we were given, I don't know if this was at other schools, but we were given some funding to help support like 3 after-school programs. I guess my kind of complaint on that, yes, you should rely on people that have expertise such as teachers in there, but also why does it have to come in the form of an extra added on after school program? And then also there really weren't like you could choose what you wanted to do. There weren't guidelines for that.
Yeah, that
you
was
had
for
to you had to write about what you were going to do, but
Was that for the long-term ELLs?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, they incentivize that without a clear picture.
No structure for that.
I was just going to say, in terms of disorganization at the district level, I don't think that's just an ELD issue. I know in our special education department, like it's been rounds of chaos. So it's not just a ELD thing. I think it's an Adams 12 thing. It seems like, I don't know if other content areas have similar issues with their district people, but it's not just that one program.
I see it. Math doesn't have as big a problem, but I do feel like the district's taking steps to try to clean house in a lot of ways.
My concern with that is I feel like I'm learning a lot and I can be a resource in my school, but I don't feel like I have a level of expertise where I could be a building ELL coordinator that could keep all, I think I can provide strategies for my department and my teammates and those kind of things, but I think we need a strong district leadership and focus on that.
With experience.
Yeah, with experience.
I don't have the experience side of things yet. Like, we're getting all this background in educational and theory stuff, but in terms of putting into classroom, like, we're just trying things out right now. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, you completed my thought.
We're set with question number 3. We're halfway there. This is question number 4. Do you think this program has shifted your views or opinions about bilingual students' education? And if yes, and in what ways, right? How so?
I'd say absolutely. Not that I had negative views or opinions before, but that I was maybe just too much blinders on. Mm-hmm. So I think the program has done a great job for me recognizing, well, it's a few things so far. I definitely recognize the need for a much better program and implementation, which I see we don't have. I would have never noticed before that all the ELD classes are down in what we call the dungeon part of our building. But that's where they are. It's the worst part of the building to be in, and that's where we send them. And definitely so many students now that I look back and they say, I assumed they were understanding everything because we could have a conversation in English, and now realizing, wow, they needed so much more language support from me, and I didn't give it. So it's helped me a lot.
The two words that I keep coming back to are explicit and intentional. And that's what it's taught me is you can't just think about them and care about them and want to do a good job with them. You have to actually find strategies and try things out. Be willing to get out there on the edge of the diving board and jump off.
And I think it's opened my eyes to, I don't even know if I knew my ESL students a couple of years ago. Now it's like, oh, okay. And then it just opens your eyes to knowing it, and then now we've got these strategies, you know, and so I like to think I'm going to be even better, you know, but it really did shift my thoughts that I even had, you know, students that really could use more support than I necessarily knew.
I think I feel more confident in working with the parents of my bilingual students and working on building community in my school. So like, for example, we have PTO Hispano, and then with the makerspace that I run, inviting not just my students but the families and the like younger siblings / cousins. I think that's helped, along with this program, has helped me view my students' home lives in a different way, and helped me support them in their learning and homework and education in general.
I think the view of, I'll admit that I had the view of my students did, when they were emergent bilinguals, they did have a deficit in language, and it changed to now they have a Language One resource, they have a Culture One resource, something to tap into, and something I need to learn more about how to do that. Also, there were things where I feel like I had intuition about, like, it's okay for kids to discuss content in their first language, but now I have, I can better articulate why.
I think similar to what you said, knowing that my students come with this background knowledge, and knowing that they have a lot to offer, and we're not really starting at step one, was really eye-opening, because just because they don't have it in their L2 doesn't mean that they don't have it in their L1. But I think using that growth mindset and knowing that they actually do come with something, and I'm not starting at the very beginning, was really eye-opening. And I think that has helped me become a better teacher, and also putting my background knowledge and being able to relate to my students that way has also been really beneficial for my students and for me in the classroom.
Actually, I gotta be honest with another opinion I'm thinking right now too, is that clearly a couple of years ago, if I got a day one student in the room that spoke no English at all, my opinion would be, yeah, there's no way I can teach this person anything, so keep them comfortable, keep them safe, and move on. And then last year, getting a day one student and feeling so much more empowered to say, oh no, I got some things to try, like I can bring this person into the loop, and that definitely is rewarding.
I'm definitely encouraged by the like professional communities that have developed, whether at the school level or here in the cohort, in that we're acknowledging there's issues from instruction all the way to, you know, curriculum development to programming to policy level stuff. And as encouraged as I am to see a lot of people more vested in development as individual teachers, I'm also discouraged to see the way it's hard to say that we have a minimal impact within a certain program or within certain policy confines, that limit our ability as instructors to really help emergent bilinguals develop. So both encouraging and discouraging, I guess.
I think the program has really helped me feel stronger about empowering them to view their L1 as an asset. Because a lot of students that we get at Pathways come in and say, oh, at my last high school I could only speak English, and oh, this, that, and the other thing. And we hear all these tales of woe from former high schools, which I don't know how many are completely accurate and how many are partially accurate, but I say, well, communicate to me, in the way that you feel most effective, and if I have to figure out what that means, that's on me, and so I feel more empowered to do that because of this program. I don't know that I was in the position to feel that open about the way I establish rapport with my students before.
Are we ready to move on to question 5? So based on your experiences in the program, how do you define language and its role in education?
Okay, so I'm a language arts teacher. So what I say
Let's
about
hear it.
this, right? So it's not like I could probably write a whole thesis on this, but I actually feel like the program for all of us, because we're in different contents, has maybe made it more eye-opening that language is a part of math, it's a part of science and engineering, and so maybe that's made it so that you realize, yeah, language is so much a part of every single content that we have to be sure that we're getting that, because that's how kids learn. They need to know the language of your contents, so it's maybe helped with everybody to understand that it's so important.
I think, I don't know if it was the last class or one of the classes, but I wrote about how, at a fundamental level, everything communicates. Communication is a key part of just nature, and just thinking about, through this program, seeing that when we're not making things accessible for all students, you're inhibiting their ability to communicate and be part of the class. And by allowing through the use of these different strategies and scaffolds, we include more people, and we allow people to define or express themselves in math, in science, in whatever it is that they're doing, and just fulfilling a fundamental need as human beings to want to communicate. Babies communicate in their babble. We want that affirmation, and it is our job in our classrooms to make sure that our students are being heard, are being able to communicate, whether it's through yes or no, or the different levels that we're talking about right now. It's allowing me to see okay, we're not just teaching them our content, we're allowing them to access and be a part of our society. Ian, I think, mentioned it, our role as educators is much more than our content. We are creating the next generation, whether they're doctors, whether they're engineers, whether they work for McDonald's. People need to communicate in whatever they're doing, and it is our job to make sure that we are teaching language, however way, that we are allowing people to communicate effectively.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that from a more theoretical kind of basis or background. I'm all about the Chomsky approach to language as an innate it's part of our nature as humans to learn language and to try to communicate, and we do that through a system of these different linguistic variations. So I think at its basis, language is communication. It's how we relate to the world. But we're also acknowledging through different approaches in this program and through conversations that language doesn't only come with, you know, the grammar and the syntax and semantics, but also the way we see and the way we perceive the world, our input and export in language is representative of different perspectives. And I think when we kind of key into that and use that in our instruction and in our teaching of English language, not for the sake of English language, but for the sake of communication and for the sake of building capital in a majority English-speaking society or English-speaking context, we're doing more than educating. We're pushing some kind of we're providing opportunities beyond the classroom in language.
For me, I like having things like categorized and labeled and then looking at how they play. So just looking at language from the domains, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, thinking about being intentional with which one I'm focusing on or how those interplay with each other, or if it's Bix and Kelp or anything like that, and thinking like, oh, that was eye-opening for me. Is just because a student in my room is speaking what appears to be fluent English doesn't mean that they're able to learn the content strictly from an English perspective. So that's buckets.
Can I have one definition of language? If I would ask you, what is language? What would you respond to me now?
It's just the way that we communicate our thoughts and our feelings. I don't know.
Whether speaking it or writing it.
Yeah.
Or acting it out, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think that especially like in this program specifically, like we've been able to focus on academic language and just social language. And I think that in education we definitely define language as we want you to communicate more in an academic proper way, and we don't see that the way that everyone I don't know how to phrase this, but like as teachers we want our students to speak in proper English or in academic English, and through this program we've been able to see that in order for our students to become more proficient in academic language, they need to understand the content that we're focusing on, and that doesn't mean that they can't use their social language in order to communicate that academic English. So I think that there's a lot of different layers to the definition of language depending on what we're focusing on, and I think that in education we do focus more on that academic language.
Are we set with question 3? With question 5, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Any final thoughts? Let's pause it for a second until we get our that.
It's recording, guys.
Okay.
And you got food in your mouth.
So now we're going to question number 6. So in your opinion, what is the relevance of culture in the process of teaching and learning?
I think its biggest relevance is in everybody feeling comfortable and welcome. You can't learn if you're not feeling like you're in a space that's welcoming.
And it's important to know and realize that everybody's culture is important. You know, so we have to honor everyone's different culture and where they come from. And I think this program has taught me to try to get to know that more than I used to, because we used to just start teaching. You know, so I'm hoping to do a little bit more of the knowing them before I start teaching.
I think from Kathy's class, when we did the culture wheel assignment, like that taught me to keep in mind I should never assume anyone's culture, both in the other people at the cohort as well as my students. So with my students, it's relevant to understand that their background knowledge and their choices are going to be affected by their culture. And if I get to know their culture, then I can have a better understanding of their background knowledge and the reason why they make the choices that they make.
I think in that culture wheel activity as well, it was interesting to see the diversity even within this group of, like, I don't know, mostly semi-middle-aged people, white middle-class-ish people, semi. But like we had the diversity, but also so many similarities in terms of, God, we all want kind of the same things. We want our kids to do well, and we have our family that were, important to us, and so there's just kind of a dichotomy about, like, man, we're all different, but there's so many things that pull us together and bring us together that I think there's a lot that we can pull from on either end of that spectrum in terms of, here's the unique things about these people, but then again, we all kind of go back to those same kind of similar human being sort of aspects.
Yeah, and going off of that kind of dichotomy that you explained, I think, like, in general, culture is that lens with which we experience, being human. So everybody has that basis, but in order to tap into what those resources look like and how can those be used for our development in the classroom or students, whether it's language development or content, knowledge, we have to frame it in a way that's kind of that teacher as cultural broker, right, and navigating that, exposing students to different cultural aspects from different places and different times and different peoples, but also helping students become aware of their own cultural influence and how that changes the way they approach things, particularly when it comes to language.
I think that validating culture has been something that has been brought to my attention in this program. Like, if we validate everyone's culture, then we kind of give everyone a voice and everyone is able to be heard. And if that's what we're teaching, then there's more of a buy-in in actually wanting to learn something, because the students see their culture or they see themselves or they're able to put themselves in that spot. And I think, like, without culture, you can't really teach anything. So I think within our own classrooms, we create our own classroom culture, and making sure that everyone is validated within that culture is crucial to learning.
It allows us to see students' true culture and, like, fight back against things like, their culture doesn't value education, or statements like that are just not grounded in reality.
Can you give an example of that validation, if you don't mind, the two of you or anybody else, or something that you
I think
see
just
where
focusing on it allows you to get to know students, at a deeper level, and not just see them as the white kid and the brown kid, and that goes to the diversity. Like, not all of the ELL students are going to have the exact same backgrounds. There's certain things that are going to be in common. I don't know if I have a specific example, but I think it's just knowing it shines a light on it, which allows you to be able to dig deeper and know it more genuinely.
The one thing that comes to mind for me, like when you asked for an example, was I don't know if it was in this class, this reading. There's a lot of readings in my head. But one of them talked about how we need to make sure that we're not always, like, if we're having a reading about climate change or something, or whatever the topic is, if we're asking kids to do a demanding task such as reading and comprehend or even be able to access reading, we shouldn't also tag on, oh, this is something that's not culturally relevant to you. It's something about the United States, or it's something about our culture. Like, that it's better to have something that's more culturally, like where the rest of the students are learning about somebody else's culture and that person is in the know about that specific topic, and their demanding task is really just, how do I access this even though I'm already familiar with this? Like, oh, this is an issue that I'm very familiar with in Mexico or something, if it's Spanish. And so that really stood out to me as I need to make sure that what I'm providing isn't, I'm asking kids to understand content and like the reading and something that doesn't make sense to them. Like CSR brings up the fact that things like not understanding wheelbarrow could be a word, a clunk for a kid. Like they don't understand that word, and they won't understand how Newton's second law applies to this example because they don't even know what this thing is. So I feel like being like thinking about kids' culture and what they might have been exposed to is important when we're bringing up content and asking them to do these things. Like, is it something they've even ever been exposed to?
I mean, I think of one example I was just thinking about this morning where the text that I use sometimes to talk about social emotional skills gives the example of two women going to buy a computer, and they get frustrated in this prospect of buying a computer. I'm like, well, why isn't it a mother and a daughter or a sister and a brother planning a quinceanera? I probably slaughtered that word, and I apologize if I did. But or why isn't it, they're making, a meal in their kitchen, whatever that might look like for that family. So trying to figure out how to make those texts more culturally relevant, I think, is just something that we're kind of going to be, the landscape that we're on right now, and we need to figure out ways to build those bridges so that the reading materials and the curriculum and the standards are not so slanted.
On sort of a different path, I feel like the culture wheel activity too that we did in Kathy's class, it was fun, but it was also valuable because I felt like we're all from the same culture base. Because no, we're all completely, wildly different, and so just kind of understanding that, helping to remember that also all these students learn differently in all their different little microcultures, meaning how important it is to be sure I've got some group activity, some individual activity, some part, so that everybody has a chance to learn and thrive in their best setting.
I think in that process of kind of being more introspective with the teacher's approach, we also have to kind of reflect on our own bias. And that becomes really, really difficult in my role in language development, is separating what is English language objectively without the culture that accompanies it and the many microcultures that accompany it. So it's really difficult to maintain cultural relevancy in your texts and your instruction, while also teaching the English language in a context that necessarily involves teaching culture and historically and socially mostly assimilation rather than acculturation, rather than teaching students how to code switch and navigate various cultures. We're rapidly integrating them or throwing them into this kind of sink or swim position where English necessarily accompanies American or mainstream culture. So it's going back to just being more aware of our biases going into our instruction, and the way we teach, the content we teach has everything to do with the way we've been programmed through our micro and macro cultures.
One last thought, are we set for the next one? Number 7, how do you define social justice? Not necessarily an academic definition, but a practical definition of social justice, or what does it bring up within you, this word of social justice? Because it's very used.
I think social justice is necessarily by its nature like reactive to inequities, whether those are social or racial or most of them derive in pretty terrible history. but social justice itself is combating those inequities all across society and culture that we see exist because of whatever it is, compounding moral debts, or basically built on whatever capital has come before the current situation. And I think there's many ways to do that, right? There's building community, and there's education, and there's housing, and there's a million different ways to get there, a million different avenues, but it's all necessarily reactive.
Yes, everybody in the society feeling like they're treated fairly would be an example of social justice, but certainly not everybody in our society feels like it's fair.
Any definition is valid, or any thought is valid, again. So it's basically, we're not judging each other or the definition itself. It's basically your opinion.
Going on what Robert said, it's kind of nuanced. It's the difference between equity and equality, right? Mm-hmm. Social justice, I feel like, slants or tends towards equity rather than equality, and equity looks a lot different in geographical regions, subpopulations, different backgrounds. Looks a lot different depending on that historical experience or lived experience.
I think it also adds a different layer to education as well. I think a lot of, maybe in the past, it's like, I gotta get these kids to learn these set skills, but it's not. It's more like, okay, here's these set skills, but then where is that gonna be useful, and how is that gonna, play out in their future, and how is this one skill about adjacent angles going to then impact their future, and can it, or how can we make it so that there's relevance there? I don't know. Yeah, it just seems like it's like, here's my idea of teaching, and now, oh crap, got these other layers that need to be built on top. Mm-hmm. Or integrated, maybe.
I think in the context of education in this cohort, it's holding people accountable to provide appropriate opportunities.
I think that if we break social justice down, yes, we want equality and equity. Is that how you say it? But I think that if people don't have the language to describe what they need, or they don't have the educational background to describe what they're trying to fight for, then things get misunderstood, and what people are fighting for, that focus shifts. So it's really important that within social justice, people are educated, and we are educated for what is being fought for. And going back to everything that we've talked about, the word power comes to mind, and how the groups that have the power are the people that have that language to express what they feel is being misrepresented, and usually lower class people, or people that don't speak the languages, or that don't speak English, which is the language of power, are not able to fight for this social justice that they want. So,
I really like that. Yeah.
Thanks. I had to work really hard for it.
Yeah.
I'm sweating a little bit.
I'm talking a lot, but this is my jam, and that reminded me of our approach to education, or at least my personal approach to education is very Freirian in that education is a liberation process, and education is that process of empowering individuals to take opportunities, or helping them navigate those opportunities in order to to claim power or seize power, and that doesn't have to be structural or governmental. Seizing power can be building that capital, building that that ability.
Kind of building on what you said, just when I first saw the word social justice on the board, it reminded me of that quote that was in the book from some of the reading we did, the Thomas Jefferson. But it says there's nothing more unequal than the equal treatment of unequal people. And when you first read that, you think, well, I can see a lot of people reading that and saying, oh, it's the dumbest thing I ever read. But I think social justice goes hand in hand with understanding that quote and being like, oh, it makes a lot of sense.
Kathy commented on something about how, we as educators and in this role have a lot of privilege, and how can we use that privilege to help everyone achieve more and to gain more access. And I think that's the piece that kind of stuck with me, was that idea of, okay, you've got something that other people don't have, recognize it, now do something about it. Don't just say, cool, now you have an obligation to help others, a responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility.
And somewhere in one of the readings we did too had that mention of there's definitely a system of power out there, but the people who have it tend to ignore it or not recognize it, and the people who don't have it absolutely know it's there.
I think from reading that book in Kathy's class, Racism Without Racist. I've been in social justice conversations with fellow teachers or just friends, and it's often a lot of that's not me, and it is everyone, right? So from that book, being more comfortable with I can aid in this, or I can use my privilege to help build up other people.
We ready to move
Let's
on?
do it.
Second one is this one is highly related. It's like, what does inclusion mean to you? What does it look like in classroom practices?
Sylvia, how many more questions?
I think there's one more. Yeah, that's it. One more. 9. So those two.
Well, I think it's the same sort of thing. It's equity. I need to alter my lesson planning and my delivery of what I do so that there's equity in the classroom. And I can't hear teachers say, well, I can't let this kid use notes when not everybody uses notes, or I can't let this, as if it has to be a one-size-fits-all thing. So I think the inclusion is you provide scaffolds or steps so the students can all achieve the same high standards, the same high expectations. That doesn't mean that they all have to be doing it the same way.
Yeah, providing access. It necessarily or it necessitates differentiation. In order to have that inclusion, we have to be really explicit in our classroom practices and make sure students feel represented, but are also able to access whatever it is that we're instructing, whatever it is that we need to teach or inform.
Right, that not providing someone the tools or help they need to access that education, someone may not feel like they're excluding someone by doing that, but in a sense you really are. And so the inclusion's got to be not just I gave you the opportunity to learn, but I gave you all the resources and tools you needed to make it happen as well.
We're ready to move on to question 9, or do you have a final comment, or? Okay, this is the final question.
We're for inclusion. So this one's worth double points, right?
Yeah.
I'm wearing my inclusion shirt.
Look at that, right? It's
Oh, yeah.
Some of you spoke about some of the leadership role that you could be having. So if you were up to mentor a first-year teacher, right, or be that sort of expert in your school, what advice could you give them about the best practices to teach bilingual students?
Well, I gotta say, what we are doing in class, in this class right now, would be what I would, if I was gonna mentor someone, I'd pull that out. I pull out, here's what I do for your level 1s and 2s and 3s, because it's so comprehensive that, depending on what the teacher needed, it's amazing, this resource that we're building.
What is the class? Can you be specific and sort of?
So it's what we're doing in
Astrid's
Astrid's class. And
What's the name of it?
Yeah.
ESL
Instructional
methods?
methods.
I never know. I just know
So,
the teacher.
I mean, we kind of divided it up between strategies and methods and assessments. And then we had to do for level 1, 2, and 3, and tomorrow we're doing 4 and 5. So it's a really great resource to be able to show a first year teacher, although overwhelming in a way, but seeing what they need and then being able to offer them strategies, because these are strategies that I never had. So
Well, from the I can't say that word. Differentiation book. That from like the part of the introduction reading from last night was kind of going off of this question, and if we were with a brand new teacher, we would tell them, hey, like, you already know what you're doing, because you're not going to treat this student differently, but you are just going to give them a little bit more support depending on what level they're in. So yes, it is overwhelming because we do have to take those different steps in order to make sure that we tailor everything to what best meets the needs of those students. But to give a first year teacher that confidence first, because being a first year teacher is scary. I mean, being a teacher in general is kind of scary, but just making sure that they also get that confidence that they need, and then say, you know what, you already know how to do this, or you have everything you need. We just need to add a couple of steps here to make sure that your student is well off and they know what they need. So they're still students. They still need the same thing that every other student needs. We just need to tweak it a little bit.
I think one of the pieces I was looking at too is in our chapter or whatever, it was talking about kids who don't understand what you're asking them to do, look like kids who are disengaged, who don't care, who we have these teachers who come into the office and are like, these kids just don't want to learn. And I think it goes back to, well, did they know what they were supposed to be doing? Because I find myself in those situations sometimes as a learner. Like, when I misbehave in class, sometimes it's because I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And so reflecting on that and being like, yeah, and so do the students in your classroom. And it's not because they don't care and they don't want to do that. They just don't know what that is. And figuring out a way to communicate in whatever language or way you can to, okay, here is what it is that I'm asking you to do in a way that they can understand and then they can produce. I think that's so big because so many times, like, that's teachers' complaint is like, they're not doing anything. These kids are just so lazy. And there are some things that we can look at beyond just their laziness.
Well, Lorraine, I'm glad you said scared in yours, because I was thinking it would just be a one sentence, don't panic. They're more afraid of you than you are of them.
As someone who's just had their first year a couple of years ago, I remember feeling like a failure sometimes when you have those students that, speak no English, and I felt like I was failing them. So not getting overwhelmed, like Lorraine said, and understanding that when you're providing access to the content, other issues that you have as a first year teacher go down, like your classroom management. If you are truly scaffolding and differentiating, your classroom management will improve as well. So even though it seems overwhelming with the amount of stuff you're doing as a first year teacher, if you spend your time and energy making the content accessible, you're going to be freed up in other areas.
I know for my first year, I thought I had to do everything, and I did it. I was there till 10 o'clock almost every single day. So I think that would be my advice is don't add anything else to your plate besides just teaching. And then specific to bilingual students, at least as a science teacher, through my science teacher training, there was one class on literacy and language. So typical science teacher doesn't have any background in language. So understanding language of science, like breaking down language of science, and building that, I think would be the most bang for the buck via science. So if I were to mentor a first year teacher, that would be my main focus. People throw out the word differentiation they did to me, and I had no idea what that meant as a first year teacher.
Yeah, I've gone through this thought process a lot. 'Cause I feel like the amount of scaffolds, the amount of things we need to pay attention to gets overwhelming. So if I was to talk to someone or myself a few years ago, it would be focusing on like the student relationship. And for me, that means, you know, the power dynamic, the biases, the relationship history with the individual student, getting to know the student, not who we want them to be and not deficit based, but who they are, where they come from. And I think that comes from that student relationship. And we're not able to meet the needs unless we know the needs. So I think knowing the student and getting the best picture we possibly can, but keeping it student focused, not I'm getting to know this student because I'm making it easier on myself, but I'm getting to know the student because I could be most effective when the student feels heard and seen, and known. And then like trying to take all these methods and all these approaches into one like framework. I would say like the universal design for learning, you know, it's of course trademarked and published and everything, but multiple means of representation that includes comprehensible input, whatever that means for individual students, individual classes, individual contents, and then multiple means of expression and multiple means of engagement. I think those three are, you know, absolutely fundamental to all teaching, but particularly important for students at different levels, linguistically and academically.
I think chapter 2 in the differentiating book mentioned it, like best practice strategies are across the board. Like, what are bilingual students need to be doing? Like, are we putting them at ease? Are we allowing for multimodalities? Are we providing different access points? Like, things that, like, are kids engaged? Like, do they know what it is that they're having to do? Good teaching.
Professor once said that teaching isn't rocket science, but good teaching is, and I think that's like stuck with me for a long time because anyone can just stand up there and be like, la 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 la, today we're gonna learn about stuff, but
or turn to this page.
Yeah, turn to this page, but there's so much more that goes into it that people outside of education just don't see at all.
Or at the policy level instead of in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah. I can look at your classroom. Here's what you need to do.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.